this case called, well, they call it the Ballerina trial. So there's some things that I think a lot of people in the country are not aware of that's happening in our judicial system. So this is a stand your ground claim of self-defense. And so a lot of people think, oh, well, if you, and this can happen to anybody, if somebody breaks into their house or is on their property, or at any time you're self-defending, this is common that the victim who's having to self-defend themselves is having to prove to a jury that they were in self-defense. It's happened. Kyle Rittenhouse was a classic example of that. When you have people lying and suppressing evidence of crimes that happened to him, Kyle Rittenhouse should have never had to prove his position. He should have never had to prove that they were lying, because it's a crime to suborn perjury. But the felony of suborning perjury is being completely ignored. So in this particular case, I want to show you what the judge did in this case. So in this case, this is the ruling when the judge denied, last, I believe it was September, denied to this woman the right to use stand your ground, also known as SYG. It's not like, basically what it does is it prevents anybody from being even prosecuted. It's not like a defense that you use in the trial. She will use defense in a trial. She will have to prove to a jury that this cop lied. She will have to prove to the jury that he was in fact abusing her. She will have to prove to a jury that there was so much abuse going on, and even the pictures of her little girl whose mouth was all bloodied on the inside and bruises around her mouth and bruises all over her body, that the abuse was happening, that the state was ignoring, that there was a systemic discrimination going on against her and ignoring of abuse. And then she will have to prove to a jury that he in fact did cause so much fear in her because of the abuse. She will have to prove by the text messages where the man admitted to punching a dog and then lied about it in court later and said that the dog jumped on him, when the text messages show that he clearly said, yeah, I punched that dog because you made me angry about talking about his daughter Eva. Then she will have to prove to the jury that he abused and threw a 13-year-old cat. All these text messages where he admits to abuse of her. Well, I was mad. Okay, I was wrong and I got help. I was wrong and I got help. This is a very volatile and abusive man that she had protective orders against him that was not being enforced. She will have to prove to the jury that it's the court system that failed her. She will have to prove all this stuff because of what this judge did. So people don't understand. They think that this judge revealed all her evidence and that reviewing her evidence rejected all her evidence. But that's not what happened. And I think this is where people, the media, who doesn't explain this to people, really gives the idea to the public that, oh, well, since the judge rejected her self-defense, then she's guilty. And it's really a false narrative. But here is the actual ruling. So it states clearly that it did not review the evidence of the defense. Its job is to review what the court is presenting. The state is presenting their reasons why she should not be allowed immunity from even being prosecuted. And that's the problem with the law. They should also consider, any time a defense has evidence, they shouldn't just allow the state to present. It's a one-sided argument, and it's egregious, because when somebody is lying and committing the felony crime of suborning perjury to put somebody on the stand or present anything under affidavit under penalty of perjury, and they have evidence that that person is lying, that's a criminal act of suborning perjury. And there should be a process to allow a victim of corruption, a victim of subornation of perjury, should be allowed to present to a judge that this prosecutor and this cop is lying and committing the criminal act against me, suborning perjury, and present that to the judge. And this is the type of very specific things that women who are advocating to stop this criminalization of self-defense of women, and I'm going to show you some stuff in that. Here's what it reads. As stipulated by this is the judge's ruling on denying her being immune from prosecution. As stipulated by the state and found by the court, the defendant motion raises a prima facie claim of self-defense. However, the court does not consider the defendant's motion or its attachment as substantive evidence. It just merely opens the courthouse doors and shifts the burden to the state to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant is not entitled to immunity from prosecution. So note right there, it is the state, absent the defense presenting all that they have and arguing that the state is committing perjury, which they are and should be prosecuted. It will take a separate legal petitioning by people and lawyers to hold the DA and the officers who are in fact lying in what they're presenting to the court accountable for perjury. They will have to do that. And the feds can get involved, like they did get involved in Karen Reed's case. They investigated investigators who were presenting false evidence, and they have, in fact, hired very expensive witnesses that did, in fact, prove that what they're saying is not true, right? So this is where you have things called federal crimes of suppressing evidence of crimes. Suppressing evidence of crimes is a federal crime, and the FBI can get involved and prosecute when they turn their heads systematically, especially when there's gender discrimination, which is a civil rights violation. So that's what's happening here. You have a systemic discrimination against women, not just in Florida, but or others. It pretty much across the country. This is systemic. So the court clearly states here that they're only considering the state has to prove to deny immunity to this woman. So considering the totality of the one-sided story of competent and substantial evidence, not being allowed to argue that they're committing perjury or any of that, whatever the state presented, admitted during the stand your ground hearing, the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence, which is a one-sided argument, that the victim's homicide was not a singular act of necessary self-defense, but was instead a culmination of a lengthy, concerted effort by the defendant to eliminate the victim from her life and the life of their child, when the defendant's efforts to enlist the assistance of law enforcement, child protective services, and the judicial system failed. She took matters in her own hands, as told Dr. Broder she would. See, this is where we have a problem. You're having a judge using this stand your ground hearing as basically convicting her before she has a trial. So she will have to prove to the jury, because she was denied the immunity from being criminally prosecuted, she will have to now argue that the cops lied in their report, just like Karen Reed had to argue that these cops are lying in the reports. You put Stephen Seraph, the first day, put him on the stand, and he testified that in fact there was a report that had been used to get her indictment. That report was false, and the officer testified that it was false, claiming that officers had arrived on the scene sooner than they had. He clearly testified it was false. And then you had him testifying that there was only a light dusting of snow on top of John O'Keefe, which basically contradicted all of the testimony of those people saying that he'd been there since 12 something in the morning. And so that evidence was, the states were contradicting themselves. Then you had Trooper Guarino, who testified against Trooper Paul. Trooper Paul said this EDR data here says that her car had a collision at 12:45 a.m. Trooper Guarino said that's not possible because the Wi-Fi at John O'Keefe's house said that she was at his house at 12:36 a.m. And it's a good 10-minute drive from that house to that house in those conditions. So she had left at 12:26 to 12:28 a.m. It's not possible that she was even there at 12:45 to have a collision at 12:45. So she had to prove all that. She had to take all of that to the jurors, who, of course, half of them were like, there's no way she did anything, but this putting the victim of corruption, victim in this type of case, that wasn't a domestic violence case. Okay. This is a domestic violence case. And this is so common to the victim has to prove when she's self-defending. And this has been going on for so many decades. When a woman is battered and something happens. If a cop lies in a report, the judge clearly here didn't allow any evidence to say that they're lying. But I'm going to show you the evidence that there is lies happening. They said she shot him in the back, was one of the things that was said. Okay, so there is this. Let's just take this right here. I'm going to show you what this guy testified, and this was during custody battle, that there were, she was begging for help, trying to, first of all, this man's first wife was killed. That was her allegation, that she suspected after she got to know this man and saw the violent episodes of him. She believed that he killed his first wife. And so she tried and begged and pleaded for help. But this guy was very manipulative. He would lie in court and say, oh, well, the dog jumped on me, so that's why I punched him. But look at this text message right here. I punched the dog because you got me so mad. Like, you would stop about Eva, always Eva. So here, this is classic behavior of an abuser. Whenever they do something, they make the victim the perpetrator. It's the victim's fault. You got me so mad. That's why I punched the dog. Like, you punch a dog because you're mad at the woman. This is what we're dealing with. This is a text message that is so evident of a volatile man that they're trying to build a narrative of why she killed him. When you're dealing with these kind of hostile and tumultuous situations, anything could have happened in a split moment when you have somebody who's violent like this. This man attacked a dog because he was angry. This isn't like he say, she say. This is his own words. There is no needing to prove that he said these things because these are his own words right here. Then you have his admitting this 13-year-old cat. He abused the 13-year-old cat. So he beats the dog. He beats the cat. So he admits it. So she's like, so you threw a 13-year-old cat. And he's like, well, how many times do you want me to say I failed? I lost it. I broke. I know it. I got help. So this is how abusers act. They abuse, they deny, and when they leave them and begging them or trying to convince them that they should not, it's not enough to leave them, then they're just like, okay, so I got help. You know, this is classic behavior of an abuser. He hit, kicked, punched the dog, threw the family cat, used his abuse of their pets as a means to hurt and control her. So then you have the baby. Okay. You had so much evidence. This man is volatile. Anything could have happened in the day that she killed him. Anything. The baby. This is the baby. So you're pulling back the diaper. She's got bruises. Look at this. This is what she would come back with after being with this man. Look at this. All these bruises around this baby's neck. He's choking a baby. Okay. Look at this. Look at all this blood inside this mouth of this baby. Look at this bruise around her poor little face. Look at this. This is what this man did to this little girl. And you think that this isn't a guy who would be, he has so much rage, he can't even control himself with a baby. A baby. If somebody has any self-control, a little innocent baby, right? You think that he wouldn't try to kill her in one of his fits of rage? But this is not, the judge didn't consider any of this. And this was also what I'm showing you in this letter. It shows clearly they didn't consider any of that. They only presented what the state said. And so what the state said was suborning of perjury. And this is where people have to come together, come out here, and the crowd that's out there protesting what this horrific thing has done against this woman, they need to demand that subornation of perjury, they must be prosecuted. But it's the DA who's suborning the perjury because he has the evidence. So they're saying that he was shot in the back. You can't claim self-defense when you're shooting somebody in the back. Okay? Right? So this is what they presented to the judge, and he only heard her stuff and basically convicted her without even having a trial. So the medical documents show that he was, in fact, shot from the front. Not the back, the front. So when you have lies like this, then you have the failure of enforcing a protective order. And I want to tell you my personal experience. I have a stalking order against somebody in 2 different courts. And I have recorded conversations with the FBI, recorded conversations with the chief of police, recorded conversations with many officers, recorded conversations with the county DA. I had a man preventing me from getting a tow truck driver to my home. I have had a man come up to me in a road with a gun out, spotlighting my face. He's on camera, going to my rental property, driving over my fence, reaching over the fence, messing with my electrical stuff while I have a stalking order in place. I have on video a man at nighttime on my land, caught on CCTV camera. You see his face because he doesn't know the camera's there, and he turns and you clearly see his face clear as day. They identify. I have video of me live streaming 4 officers standing in my home looking at my security footage, and I'm asking them, why is it okay for this man to do this? He's wearing a headlamp on his head and he's shining my car that I'm sitting in, spotlighting me. And they said it's not okay, especially with the stalking order in place. And then you see him taking a flash drive of the video evidence and telling me while I'm live streaming, and they know I'm live streaming. They showed up at my house for the evidence, and I showed them I'm live streaming. And then telling me that they're going to send things to the prosecutor, and then don't. And then don't. I call the prosecutor's office, and they have nothing. This goes on for months. I file a federal lawsuit, of which it has been concluded that I can sue them in their individual capacity for bad faith acts. So then you have them lying to the judge, saying that they sent things to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor's office chose not to prosecute him. But in fact, I have the prosecutor's investigator recorded saying that they got nothing. The prosecutor said that they got nothing. And eventually, after the lawsuit, there was 3 warrants that went to him. And so I have recorded conversations with the DA. I have them on video. This man drives right up to the entrance of my property while I'm trying to leave and blocks me from leaving. I have so much evidence, and people don't understand. There's nothing to hold the officers who lie and deny and hide. There's nothing to hold them accountable. People don't understand. It's only the feds who can come in when they're committing federal violations of suppression of evidence. I have recorded conversations, and I've even uploaded them to my YouTube channel, of the FBI telling me that they're not going to prosecute them. They acknowledge that what they did was wrong. They did an investigation. They did contact the prosecutor's office, and they did, in fact, not get anything after they testify or they tell a federal judge that they had sent things to the prosecutor, and they still don't prosecute them. And so I have advocated for mandatory prosecution of any officer who fails to enforce a protective order, or who hides or denies or suppresses any evidence of violence. And in any time that they falsely report anything, they must be prosecuted. I am advocating for mandatory prosecution, and I will continue to do this until it is passed. I have spoke to legislators. There was one bill that was recently written up based on my begging these legislators. Okay? And that's what needs to be done, because this is a classic example. Now, granted, in continuation, sorry, I have a phone call. So in continuation, I know that there are women who are also abusive. There are women who lie. There are men who lie. But when you have concrete evidence that an officer is lying, there has to be removal of that officer from power. We desperately need mandatory prosecution, because officers should be respected. Officers risk their lives every day, going out there never knowing where we're a threat. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a war veteran. And I cannot imagine, because when I was at war, even though we dealt with hostiles, we had a pretty good idea who the enemy was, right? But when officers deal with never knowing when something could go south with any person, anywhere, that we have to give full respect of officers, and the integrity of the law enforcement system needs to be improved. It's so set up for people who go into law enforcement. You hear little kids when they want to be a police officer when they grow up, and the intent for most of them is not to go in and be a creep and be a sexist and to be, completely biased and to lie in reports. That's some of them, that may be their agenda, and a lot of times they don't go in with that, but it happens. And it's so systemic. What you don't know, maybe, about the VAWA legislation that they passed for women in the 1990s, I've read as when my reading cases started when I was in law school in 2007. And I have since then have read thousands of cases. I read cases all the time, and I've read so many cases over the years that people don't have any idea. And before, the media really started covering this whole, the trials, you have no idea how many cases are not discussed. The media cherry picks a case that they want to make a sensational case. There are so many cases that go through the courts all throughout the country. And I challenge anybody who doesn't think there's systemic discrimination going on. I challenge you to read 500 cases. I have read so many cases of overturned police abuse, excessive force, so many things that's not ever shared in the media. They just don't make it to that level. So promoters of the Stand Your Ground laws emphasize the need to protect citizens from threats outside the home, while ignoring the fact that intimate partner violence and more broadly domestic violence have been and remain the most common forms of violence against women. There are so many women in prison who were forced to take plea deals because they're poor. They can't afford a good attorney. Like Karen Reed is, she wasn't a victim of domestic violence, nor was she an abuser, but she's definitely a victim of corruption. That's an absolute. She's absolutely a victim of corruption, and so is John O'Keefe. Okay, you had Stephen Serif get on the stand and say that these cops lied, and they said that they were at the scene sooner than they were. You have Trooper Guarino, who basically called them all liars. You have suborning of perjury of the DA saying that no, it's silly to say that there was a dog involved. There was never any dog attack. Alberts get on the stand and say their dog has never attacked anybody, and he knew about the hospital reports because they impounded the animal control records. So he suborned perjury. There's so many cases where cops lie, and cases make their way into court because it's very biased against the defendant that they want to take out and take their freedom. These 3 cases here, there's hundreds of thousands of cases of women. Hundreds of thousands. It's called criminalized survivor. Unless you're in that situation, you don't know. My personal situation dealing with my stalker since 2021 is that if when the person approached me, I'm just doing a simple thing like trying to get into my property. I have a security chain across the entrance of my property, and the person stood there and wait for me with a gun and a spotlight, comes up behind me in my car, has a spotlight out, and whips out his gun. And I'm not able to see what he's doing with his gun once he spotlights my face, or get it on camera what he's doing with his gun because of the spotlight. But that is a potential threat, and many women would have fought that person. This person chased me into a tow truck. I had to walk a couple blocks down the road to where this person was blocking a tow truck driver from getting to my home And the guy called the sheriff department. Saying there's a guy out here, he's not letting me up the road. He chased me. It's on video. I'm disabled. I'm using a cane. There was one night I had to hide behind a tree because he was out there with a gun and call 911. And the deputy chastised me for calling 911. And I have a recorded conversation going to the sheriff department, talking to that deputy, another deputy. I wanted to file a complaint that how dare he tell me that I can't call 911 in that situation? How dare he? And he did apologize and say, yes, we will talk to him. That's absolutely a reason to call 911. So, I had to go get a stalking order because this person just would not leave me alone, would, mess with me when I'm on my rental property trying to get stuff ready, and just in all different kinds of ways, vandalizing my property, approaching me, screaming at me, coming into my property. He was told by officers, it's recorded, that to leave, don't approach her, leave her alone, stay away from her residence, don't go into her residence, leave her alone, and then he came up into my property and parked behind my car, screaming, hollering, honking his horn. And so they issued a formal no trespass order, and he should have been charged. He violated direct order to stay away from me, do not approach me, stay off my property. Of course, they didn't charge him, and they in the no trespass order stated for the reason to issue it, because I let him hear the audio of what he had done, and I didn't have cameras at that time. I did after that. He said that he trespassed and harassed me, was the words of the reason to issue that. So then I had to go get a stalking order, and in the petition I stated that he was following me to my rental property, approaching me, verbally abusing me, going to my property, trespassing, vandalizing, approaching, spotlighting me, just all kinds of stuff. Spotlighting my properties, spotlighting my security cameras, anything just to menace and terrorize me. And I wasn't the only one, by the way. He was doing stuff too. Okay, there were other people who wrote statements, but I'm the one that took it to court. They didn't bother taking it to court. They said it wouldn't do any good. They're like, look what it did for you. It didn't help you any to go get an order, did you? It cost you a lot of money, and they were right. But I'm not giving up, right? So in the petition I filed the specific things that he was doing that I believed was stalking. And so at the hearing, I did hire an attorney, and he argued very specifically, and the guy was like bragging that cops were telling him to assure him that he would never face any charges. And he literally bragged that. And I paid $900 to get that transcript. And so the judge ruled, he told him, he said, well, I will decide if this is stalking. I will make that decision. They're just they're just fact writers. They just write down what the facts are. They don't, they can believe that there's a crime happening or not sure or whatever. They just write down stuff in reports, and that's what they did. Although they should have sent it to the prosecution's office. But even if they don't send things to the prosecution's office, doesn't mean you can't get help. So the judge ruled that this was stalking and issued a 5-year order. But he continued to do the same things over and over and over and over. He would literally drive right up to the entrance of my property, like right up to the entrance. I was in I'm a veteran, so I was in like music therapy for PTSD, and I had gone and said that I'm under a lot of stress because of what's happening, and I actually had to get counseling over this because it's not even safe to walk in my neighborhood because the things that he's doing, which I don't go into great detail, but it was a lot. And while I'm live streaming, and it was like an online group, while I'm live streaming with my webcam on my camera, literally my stalker came right up to the entrance of my property. And he's parked, blocking my driveway. I turn my camera and face my security monitor, and I show the therapist what's happening. I said, I have to excuse myself from this session because I have to go deal with this. I mean, he would just do things in broad daylight in front of everybody. They finally did end up arresting him when they came out, and oh my gosh, I'm not even going to all that. But after they arrested him, they took his truck. He would put he I saw him one day. He was coming up the road pulling huge boulders. We're talking like 3 feet long, 2 feet wide boulders, and dropping them in front of my driveway because he had people in the sheriff department protecting him. I've had some issues with certain people at the sheriff department because of racketeering that I exposed years ago. By the way, the sheriff recently has been arrested on felony charges of bribery and extortion and just criminal felony, you know, financial stuff. They care about the financial stuff, but they don't care about what they're doing to women in the community. There's another woman who has a stalker, not the same stalker as mine, but she has children and animals, and this person was so bold, like he would just drive right by her car with kids in it and wave a gun at her. She had stuff on video too, and then sent a text message that he was going to burn her house with her animals and dogs in it. And you would think, oh, well, that's concrete evidence. It's in writing, right? He didn't disguise who was sending it. Of course they didn't prosecute. They hide reports. They suppress evidence. And that's a felony. That's a federal crime. And so she, her house was burnt down with her animals in it. They ran her out of town. And to this day, have not charged. This is systemic. Like, these kinds of things are not uncommon. You have systemic abuse going on, and unless you've encountered it, unless you live in an area that's got pockets of abuse, and there's other women that I've shared things and people have come to me, there's all kinds of horrific systemic discrimination going on. I'm so glad that the sheriff has been removed, but it doesn't make the sheriff department any better because the undersheriff was just as crooked. I mean, and they're still trying to do racketeering things, trying to charge victims of abuse $300 if you have to call an officer to get somebody off your property. You've got a protective order, a stalking order, and they write a report saying I was on there on such day, whatever, just writing down the facts. Our statutes in our state do not allow somebody to even get travel pay for going in court and testifying and verifying that this is their report. They're charging expert witness fees. They're extorting the victims, charging them. If you have 4 or 5 officers, you have somebody who's repeatedly violating a protective order, like she did in her case. This woman did in her case, repeatedly have violations of the protective order. You have to pay them $300. I mean, it's just insanity. People don't have any idea. None. They don't know. So then you have the media who loves these sensational cases. This is a YouTube content creator, and she's doing podcast to, this was, I learned about her just by studying this case. Okay. And so please, what they need right now, I saw a report about where there are protesters. This woman, she succumbed to a plea deal because she was afraid that they were going to try her again. Her case was overthrown after she was convicted. And it's if you don't have the money for an attorney to really fight, public defenders are horrible sometimes. I don't know what situations, I didn't read her case, but I just know that I see this. It's common that women they'll give in and they will take a plea deal just to get out from under this threat of, and it's horrible. So in my case, my specific case, I know how corrupt they can be, right? So what I did is I recorded the chief of police, the deputies, the officers, the FBI who told me that he was going to investigate. I have officers who came into my home while I live streamed saying that, yes, this is a crime and we can't do this. We'll take the evidence. We'll do the prosecution. He didn't. And an FBI agent I recorded said that, in fact, that they did do an investigation and found that they did not send anything to the prosecutor. So they committed perjury in federal court and stated that they had sent things to the prosecutor when they hadn't. And they chose not to prosecute. This is why I'm advocating for mandatory prosecution. mandatory prosecution. Any officer who suppresses evidence and commits the federal crime of suppressing evidence and systemic discrimination against women, which is what's happening in this county, I believe, because they are withholding the very basic thing that you see in all murder trials. They're not even allowing the 911 call to be used in this case. Who does that? You have an egregious abuse of this judge who needs to have a petition against him. This is the 911 call that they're not allowing. I will put the link to this in the description of this video. It's a full and unedited 911 call that the judge will not allow. They're not only going to deny her the immunity from being prosecuted, they don't want her to be able to use their failures, I guess, to sue. But she could have sued a long time ago. They know that the system failed this child. They know that the abuse of this little baby. They know that they lied, that they withheld, that they allowed the protective order to not be enforced. They know. So why is the judge? These are the questions that need to ask in this case. That the mainstream media is being allowed to be very biased in reporting, just like they were in Karen Reed's case. To this day, it's not reported about the 71 count of federal indictment against 6 state troopers of Massachusetts who were involved in bribery, extortion, and giving golden treatment to fellow troopers, fellow cops, friends of cops. Okay? The media, of course, is hiding that. They hid a lot of things while they're reporting that it's just, it's not possible that, just putting doubt out there that cops are crooked, that they, while hiding this massive 71 count indictment. To this day, have not shared that. They're very biased. So why is the judge hiding evidence of the dishonesty of the lead detective, which, if an officer, most states, my state, most states, it is a felony for an officer to falsify evidence, to lie, mislead. But you see this often being done in courts. It's a crime. But you have statutes that make it a crime for them to do that, but they're not enforced. That's why we need mandatory prosecution. When officers, especially in the act of prosecuting, have used deception to falsify and mislead to get indictments or prosecuting, they must mandatorily be prosecuted. It has to be that way, because that's why the feds are being allowed to cherry pick when they want to prosecute officers. And I have a recorded conversation with the FBI saying, yes, what they did was illegal, but refused to prosecute. Okay? Why is the judge suppressing the evidence of corruption and collusion between the sheriff's department and the state attorney's office? People that know my channel, that know my situation, they've heard the FBI telling me that, yes, what they did was illegal, but it's not the threshold that they want to handle, right? They really only care about money crimes, which is why the sheriff in my county has only recently been arrested and charged with felonies, because they only care about the money. But there's so many women victims in my community, and I know there's more than the people who have come to me and told me their horror stories. Why is the judge excluding all the documented evidence of domestic violence? Now, I know that in the hearing, he didn't allow the defense to present, didn't accept any of their evidence. He just only considered whether the state has proven the right to go forward with the case, which in doing so basically convicts her in the judge's mind. But he has to find that she's guilty, has done everything that they said, by not allowing the defense to challenge them and prove that they lied. How is that fair? It's not. And it takes people to stand up to this process and say, no, you're not going to do this to citizens. So why is the judge blocking Ahsley's team to call multiple key witnesses? Why is the judge allowing the state to block the 911 call? This is a very egregious case, and I am so thankful for people like her who's standing up against this. So please go to and show support for this channel. I'm just a dinky little channel. Like I'm just, I don't generally do a lot of legal stuff. I'm more of a gamer, just a random blogger. But those channels who have a lot of subscribers and influence, please support them. I want to be out there protesting with those people. I'm disabled. I'm not able to drive all the way out there. So if anybody from my state of Oklahoma wants to make a trip out there to stand with them, I'll be happy to pitch in the money to share in the expenses to drive out there. I'm not really able, I can drive, some of the way, but I'm not able to drive long periods. So, but yeah, this is this is bad. And there's so many women with horror stories. And it is very, very discriminating. How could they not allow this? And look at this guy. Now, it doesn't mean that she may have all this evidence against the guy. It doesn't prove her case, right? You still have to hear all sides and hear all the evidence. But I'm so tired. I'm so tired of the people of this nation wanting to convict somebody that's innocent until proven guilty. They don't accept, yet when it comes to their rights, they don't want anybody messing with their rights. And the media, people, oh, she's guilty. And they don't even bother to investigate. Look at this. This man literally tries to justify punching a dog. I punched the dog because you got me so mad. You got me so mad. This is why I did this. That is classic of an abuser. To blame the victim of abuse. It's your fault I bashed you in the head. It's your fault I punched your dog. It's your fault I threw your 13-year-old fragile cat. It's your fault because you got me mad. This is somebody with a volatile temper who very well, I believe, is capable of forcing her into a self-defense position. So they had to lie in order to get the indictment. That's where it's really problematic, by saying that she shot him in the back when the evidence proves otherwise. He was not shot in the back. That would make it different. I've seen people who are shooting at a thief who's come into their store to rob them, and they're shooting at somebody running away. That's never okay. Yes, this thug just came into your store and he robbed you and or he took some stuff and he's trying to flee. It's not okay to shoot somebody in the back who's trying to run away, right? But that's not what the evidence shows in this case. So why are they lying? Because that's what they have to do. Why are they acting like she's not a victim of abuse, acting like this man isn't capable of putting her in self-defense position? It's ridiculous. Their theory is she just wanted to get the kid and she wanted to win. She just wanted him out of her life. And there's been women who've been convicted of that, doing something like that. The child custodies, do sometimes turn violent. But this is classic case of a woman who has been abused. When somebody will injure an animal or a child, that is a very, very dangerous person. It's not somebody who's in a fit of like drunkenness or intoxication, only harms somebody, when they're intoxicated. This is somebody who's stone cold sober, who's punching dogs, throwing cats because he's mad at his girlfriend and trying to use abuse of an animal to control that woman. My first thought when she said that she left him because she was convinced that this man was trying to poison her. And his first wife died. And I do believe there should be an investigation in the death of his first wife, just due to the volatile nature of him. I got help. So, that's enough. And that's another thing. It's like, once they abuse somebody, so what? He got help. Get over it. It's over. I'm worthy for another chance, And these these types of situations are very tumultuous and back and forth. A lot of times, sometimes are very manipulative. But she was in her own home. He wasn't living with her. He was in her house. She had no chance of losing that custody battle because of the abuse that was proven that he did to this. I mean, look at these signs of violence. This is a man of rage. This is a man who's definitely capable of killing this woman. And she'd probably be dead had she not defended herself. I do believe that. Look how he's holding her. Look at that possessive hold. Just in common non-angry times. Look how he holds her. Totally possessive. Right? Did you see the pictures of the baby? What he did to the baby. That's so sad. This poor little baby. Look at this bruising all around her mouth. It looks like he tried to choke her out. Like he tried to kill her. I've never seen a baby with bruises around her mouth and her nose like this. It's like he just held her down, trying to keep her from breathing. Look at these injuries that she's dealing with. This is the system who failed this baby, is now failing the mother of this baby. Look at this. Look at this blood inside this baby's mouth. It's so sad. Please stand with this woman. Please hold. Please. There needs to be lawyers rise up. There needs to be an official complaint filed against this judge for systemic discrimination against women. Anyways, I just beg you to please don't, whenever you see a media report, please don't just convict them in your heart. Please accept that innocent until proven guilty is a blessing that our nation has, that we should respect. And just because they're presenting things, you don't know that they're not doctoring evidence or lying. You don't know what they have. She's not speaking. She's not going on TV shows to tell her side. She's probably following the advice of her attorney. You don't know the whole story. So, and if you see somebody who is commenting on this case on YouTube, anybody who's trying to convict her, convict anybody without hearing the whole story, please be brave and stand up to that person and tell them. Call them out. Say, you're wrong. Innocent until proven guilty. There's some very mean-spirited people that are very anti-American, who don't accept freedom. Anybody who would abuse animals and a little baby is most certainly capable of murder. The autopsy, you have evidence. He wasn't shot in the back. He was shot from the front. The bullet wounds show that. The types of injury, it shows clearly. He wasn't shot in the back. These officers need to be fired. They need to be prosecuted. I beg you to pray, at the very least pray, that the FBI will get involved in this case and prosecute, and that please stand with me on the getting mandatory prosecution of anybody in law enforcement who will falsify, lie, and suppress evidence of crimes. That the laws that are in place that make it a crime to lead somebody to lie under oath when they know the evidence is false so they can get convictions, that they must be mandated to be prosecuted.